Hey, are you thinking about investing in tax liens or tax deeds and you're not sure the right type of entity you should be creating for that type of investing? Well, you're in luck because in this video, I'm going to be breaking that down for you. All right, let's get started. Okay, so the difference between a tax lien and a tax deed, if you're not familiar with this particular type of investment, is that with a tax lien, you're buying a tax certificate. So you're not actually taking title to the property. In fact, until you're outside the redemption period for the homeowner, you will not obtain title. And if you did obtain title, you'd have to do that through a foreclosure action. So you don't actually have title to the property initially. Now with a tax deed, it's different. With a tax deed, you actually acquire title to the property. Now, because of these two different types of investments and how they're made, it requires that we explore the types of entities you should be setting up to make sure that you're not only protecting yourself, but you're also minimizing your taxes when it comes to disposing of that investment, if you choose to do so, or if you want to hold it. How does that look from an asset protection standpoint? So, what do we want to look at then if we're investing in tax liens versus tax deeds? Well, the initial structure is going to have some similarities. So what I like to do is I like to start with a Wyoming limited liability company. I'll set up a Wyoming LLC and I will create this entity. I'll set it up as disregarded for federal tax purposes. And what that means is that the LLC does not have to file a tax return. And so I'll have two LLCs initially that I set up depending on where I'm investing. And this is important because for many of us who invest in tax liens or tax deeds, you're not investing necessarily in your state. You're investing in all 50 states. And so you're looking for opportunities all over the place. So for example, if you lived in Colorado, then there's no sense in creating a Colorado LLC. Set up a Wyoming LLC. One, it's faster, it's easier, less expensive, and it has anonymity. So that's why I'm recommending Wyoming for this type of investing. So if I was going to buy tax liens, I would create one Wyoming LLC and I'd make this my tax lien limited liability company. And I would run all of my tax liens through this one Wyoming LLC. So you could have potentially 20 tax liens sitting inside of here. So just keep using the same LLC over and over again for these tax liens, because if they do get redeemed, the money is just going to flow. So if this homeowner right here decided to redeem the tax lien certificate, they're going to pay your Wyoming limited liability company those funds. All right, so that's going to run right back to the LLC, and then you can distribute them out to yourself. So there's no risk of a lawsuit with a tax lien certificate because you don't own the property, right? All you're doing is owning a tax debt. So I do not have the same concerns I do with tax deeds. Now with tax deeds, it looks a little different. So if I'm going to invest in tax deeds, I typically recommend you create a few Wyoming limited liability companies here. Now again, with this type of structure, I would also set these up as disregarded. So I'd set up disregarded LLCs in Wyoming to take title to the various properties, the tax deeds that I'm acquiring. So maybe this one here is in Georgia, Florida, and Texas. So I have three different entities set up there. Now, why did I elect to set these up in separate entities and not just group them all into one like I did with the tax liens? Well, it's because of this right down here that you see, that you're owning the actual property itself, right? So since you own the property itself, you would not want to group all of these properties under the one limited liability company. So when it comes to tax deeds, we will have one Wyoming LLC per property. All right, so that's the initial structure. Now we need to explore what are we going to do with these things after we have them from a tax standpoint and with the tax liens from an asset protection standpoint. So let me just focus on the tax liens real quickly here. So now you've got your tax lien structure set up. All right, so here's my Wyoming LLC again, and I own several tax lien certificates inside of here. Now this one right here, I'm going to foreclose on this because we're past the redemption period. So this one that I'm going to be foreclosing on, I definitely do not want to continue holding it in this LLC, because if I start that process in the LLC, then what's going to happen? I'm going to end up owning the property in the limited liability company. So what we need to do then is separate this out. We need to move it out and place it in another entity for the foreclosure. So we're going to want to assign that tax lien certificate out to Wyoming LLC number 2. And then this entity here will be the one that ultimately will take title to that property. So once that tax lien has been assigned over to the LLC and it's now taken title of the property, then what's going to happen is you need to decide, what are you going to do with this investment? Is it going to be treated as a long-term hold, or is it going to be a property that you intend to flip? And so here's where we need to look a little deeper now on what the structuring or what we're going to do with that entity. So if I wanted to keep this as a long-term hold, then I will have already created another entity down here. This is my Wyoming LLC that I call my holding LLC. So I'll then take this LLC and park it right down here. So I have one common parent, because as these other ones start to come due and I'm starting to acquire those, my structure is going to start looking like this, right? I'm going to start having multiple entities holding multiple properties, and each of these entities will be down here. Now, if I intended to flip it, or if you're going to flip some and hold some, then you would want to have another entity set up for your flip so you avoid dealer status. And so this might be my LLC. Again, this could be Wyoming. And this one is set up as a C Corp for federal tax purposes. So now this entity here, if I decided I wanted to flip it and not hold it, instead of putting it into my Wyoming LLC like I did here, instead I'm going to move it into my Wyoming LLC that is treated as a C corporation for federal tax purposes, so I avoid dealer status. Because if you start flipping a lot of these, then you run the risk of being classified as a dealer in real estate, and you're going to lose a lot of the benefits that comes from being an investor. So with tax lien certificates, you have to figure out, after you obtain the property through the foreclosure action, what do you intend to do with that property? Long-term holds, then move it over to a holding company like I've shown you right here. If it's a flip and you intend to get rid of it, then move it over here to a flipping entity, because taxes are really an important consideration at this point in time. Now, what about the tax deeds? It's the same exact scenario here with the tax deeds. So with the tax deeds, let's assume that I have 3 of them that I've acquired. And so with each of these 3 limited liability companies, I need to determine, what do I intend to do with them? If I intend to hold them, then I've got this holding LLC. Now that holding LLC can hold both properties you acquire with tax liens and tax deeds, okay? Because each of the properties are in separate LLCs, so it does not matter. You can stick as many different LLCs as you need to into this one Wyoming holding LLC right here. Now again, if I'm flipping property, then I'm going to have my flipping LLC set up here. So we'll just call this flip LLC. And then the flip property, that LLC will be placed into this entity right here. So again, at that point, this is why when I originally started talking about the entities, I recommended that when you set up your entities to hold your tax lien properties or your tax deed properties, set them up as disregarded. Okay, so that means they do not have to file a tax return. You'll obtain an EIN, but there's no tax return, corresponding tax return that will have to be filed on an annual basis. And the benefit then is it allows us to move them to these types of entities without any concern for special tax filings on the back end. So ultimately what it comes down to is, if you're going to be using tax liens or tax deeds, you can tell that I mentioned use Wyoming. Now, why am I using Wyoming? Because it's simple, as I stated, all right, to set it up in Wyoming, and you can invest in all 50 states. Now, if you're concerned about owning property in Georgia or Florida with a Wyoming LLC, you don't have to be. You can own property out of state with a Wyoming limited liability company. Now, you may have to register it as a foreign entity at some point in time in the future. But when it comes to investing in tax liens or tax deeds, you don't necessarily know where you're going to get your first one, second one, third one, fourth one, whatever it is. So that's why I like to start with Wyoming. It makes it simple, set it up in one jurisdiction, and then build from there. Hey guys, if you liked the video, be sure to smash that like button. And if you want to learn more about investing in real estate from a tax and asset protection standpoint, I'd encourage you to go into the show notes and sign up for our free one-day tax and asset protection workshop where we discuss how best to set up your structures for real estate investing, not only for asset protection, anonymity, but more importantly, to reduce taxes to the lowest extent as possible. I look forward to seeing you there.